Well, these sightings and these interferences, if you want to call them, by the UFOs and in various spaces, because Bentwaters was also mentioned, Bentwaters, Rendlesham Forest case in England that had a weapons storage area, and that was an incident that went on for 2 days. They were not detrimental to planet Earth. So I think Robert and I agree that this is not a hostile act, but it does affect national security. And do you think the idea of our national security being at risk, even though they may not be hostile, could be a reason why we talk about UFOs if we can't talk about them for any other reason?
Well, yes. You and I may have come to the judgment that this was not an offensive attack by, let's say, extraterrestrial beings. In most cases, well, in all cases that I can think of, the objects did not damage the weapon systems. They simply shut them down. In my case, the weapons were not damaged at all. They were brought up back on alert within 24 hours. Now, but the real question is, shouldn't the public be involved in the conversation and to judge for themselves whether or not this is a national security incident? On the face of it, the disabling of 20 missiles in the period of a week or so for no good reason and no explainable reason, as far as I know, the Air Force hasn't come up with a valid justification for this happening, should be considered a national security event, at least on the face of it. But let's get the public involved. Let's all talk about it.
Yeah, and what happens, you and I know this, most of my work is done with military witnesses and astronauts and pilots and so forth, but the public in general sometimes addresses UFO question in a very less credible way with a lot of hypotheses and a lot of just dealing with sightings and so forth, a lot of contact stories and so forth. And so usually the media dismisses that, because they sound like wild and woolly tales. And so what happens is with these, with the people that do it in this way, the subject gets buried in the fringe of our society. It's a fringe subject. It doesn't get talked about seriously. It has a snicker factor. People laugh. I don't know what's so funny about shutting down missiles. But anyway, so I think that I credit you for giving it credibility in that we have a lot of credible witnesses, not only you, pilots and people in the military that have come forth saying, not only are we being visited, the craft do incredible maneuvers. They seem to be a technology that's far advanced than we are, and we should be having a conversation about it. However, you took a security oath. Do you want to talk about your process of breaking your security oath?
Okay, sure. I did sign an oath not to talk about this particular incident, and I kept my word even after I left the Air Force, and I left the Air Force in 1971. In 1994, I happened to pick up Timothy Good's book, Above Top Secret, and I turned to one of the pages, I think I remember page 301. There's a short paragraph about the Echo flight shutdown. And so I from that, I'd hoped that the Air Force had declassified the incident, and I enlisted James Klotz, who's an investigator from MUFON at the time.
Mm-hmm. He wrote the book with you, Beta Giant. Yeah.
Yes, I want to mention him because he's an outstanding investigator, by the way. Asked him to submit a request to the Air Force for more information. I told him, don't say a word about UFOs, just mention the shutdown of 10 nuclear missiles in '67. And the Air Force wrote back and said, well, this is classified, but since it's been so long, we're going to declassify the incident, and we're going to send documents. So they did. And that's when I started talking about it and went on some radio shows and actually did a TV show called Sightings. Because I thought I was at Echo Flight. See, at the time, I was still trying to recall exactly where I was. All these launch control facilities look the same, you know, especially from the inside of the capsule. So I didn't recall specifically the number, the name of the facility I was at. But it wasn't until later that I found out it was an Oscar flight, and then I made the connection that there were in fact 2 flights that went down within a week of each other. By that time I'd already gone public, so even though technically I'm in violation of that statement I signed not to disclose, I've continued to talk about it because this is so important.
So how many missiles were there totally that went down?
So each flight has 10 missiles. All 10 went down at Echo Flight, and all 10 went down at Oscar Flight, so 20 missiles.
And this is during the Cold War?
During the Cold War, during the Vietnam War.
Okay. So what message, or you talk about this because I don't think that this was done just haphazardly. You also mentioned, and I knew about the case, that in the Soviet Union some missiles were activated. Yeah.
In particular, yeah, I think this was 1982. There is a documented case, and again, the Russian officer was interviewed by, I think, well, an ABC reporter, and the missile was actually went into a launch sequence as this UFO was overhead. Luckily, they were able to shut it down from the launch sequence. But again, I think it was just a demonstration by these objects that they knew in detail how our systems worked, were able to shut them down, or were able to get them going in a launch. This is fantastic. This is a phenomenal story, and I want to emphasize phenomenal because we don't understand all the details of what these objects are and what they're about.